Happy Monday. What's going on, guys?
It's the Monday Rundown. We're super excited to be with everybody. What's up, Say That Nation? If you are watching us for the first time, go ahead and put a 1 in the comments so we can shout you out. If you are back watching another Monday Rundown with us, go ahead and put a 2 in the comments. That way we can know that this is not your first time, and we want to shout
Yeah,
you
give
out
you
as
some
well.
love.
Yeah.
Now, guys, if you are brand new to the platform, the way we run our Monday Rundown is Janelle and I have a back and forth discourse about some content that usually you guys provide to us, or something that we find interesting. There is a question posed or a topic essentially around the conversation, and something that we've been having a lot of fun with now is including other thought leaders in our conversation, in the discourse, by sharing some commentary that they've put out and just kind of giving you guys our take and what they have to say, and or the question of the day. And so today is definitely going to be another fun one. Today is actually one that before we got on, I was even asking Janelle, like, why do we want to have a conversation around this? So let's jump into today's question and hear what you guys have to say on it, and what Janella also has to think. So here's today's questions, guys. Boom.
Is there an advantage growing up African versus American? And I would just like to say that I think this is going to be more towards African versus African American, not just American.
Yeah,
Although
sure.
we're
That
willing
may
to
be a
talk
broad
about,
scope.
yeah, I was going to say we're willing to talk about all things. But I think for me and Winston, we're probably going to focus on African versus African American. I think it's really, I think this has been a conversation that happens typically within, I will say, just the Black community, or the African diaspora, if you will.
Okay.
And so, like, full disclosure, a little bit about me and Winston. Like, I'm the product of a first generation immigrant.
Yeah. And
Winston
I was
is an
born in
immigrant.
Jamaica. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I came here when I
And
was 7, and so
yeah. And so both of us have a view of like being Caribbean almost, right? Like that's, we kind of identify more with that. But yet when we got to this country, we're definitely labeled or identified as African American. And I know that in the Caribbean like culture, it is very similar, I feel like, to what many Africans who come to this country, and that there's a saying like, oh, like African Americans are lazy, or they
yeah,
don't
yeah,
do
yeah.
anything, they don't work hard, or things like that. And then conversely, African Americans will say about Caribbean people and even Africans, like, oh, they're stuck up, they're obnoxious, they think they're too good, right? Like
I've
all
heard
those
some
things.
other things. They're shysters, they're thieves, they're criminals in many
Yeah,
instances. So yeah.
yeah. So all of this to say, like, um, I actually think the original Black Panther, I say the original, like the first Black Panther they came out with, the late Chadwick Boseman. I think it was the first time that, like, as a culture, or like as a people, we started to talk about the way that we view each other so much. One, openly, and two, I think the narrative started to change a little bit, and I think we started to see each other differently. For me, one of the conversations that like really changed my viewpoint in all of this was when I was listening to one of the sermons by T.D. Jakes, and
Oh,
he.
good one.
Do you remember? Okay, so you remember this?
I feel like I
So
know where you're going. Yeah.
okay. So he's talking about, he's like, just so you know, this is one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Like, he's not proud of this moment that I'm about to describe. But he lands in, he had to fly somewhere to do something, right? So he's not in his hometown, but he lands in another place. He has to take a cab to the hotel. And when he gets in the cab driver is an African man, like a man from Africa, now here in the United States. And they start having a conversation, and he's really enjoying the conversation. And he ends up saying to the cab driver, you know, this is actually really amazing, because normally when I talk to people who are from Africa, I usually don't enjoy the conversation. And the driver's like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, why would you say that? And he's like, and again, remember, this is not TD Jake's best moment, but he's like, I find people from Africa to be really obnoxious and annoying in that way. And the cab driver says, I can understand that. See, the reason why you feel that way is because we are who you would have been had you not had been slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was like, what a change in perspective. Imagine if we weren't the descendants of slaves. How would we see ourselves? How would we go about
Yeah.
different things? Like we would just see ourselves differently. And so anyway, it was a moment. It wasn't TD Jakes' best moment, and he says that profusely, but it taught him a lesson, and it taught him a way of viewing just like a different lens that he hadn't really seen the differences between the two people before. Again, I think Black Panther did a really good job of that as well. Um, and so I think is there an advantage? I think the advantage just might be an advantage of how you see self. I think people in the Caribbean have a similar thought process as well, and that
Yeah.
they
We're
come
better
from the
than.
majority. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Or
like there's a sense of pride that it's a little bit different. Like there's an I can do ness about it all. Um, and it's not. And here's the thing, right? Caribbean people are technically the descendants of slaves as well, or Afro-Caribbean people, right? And if you're from Haiti, then you were the first to revolt, and that's amazing that you're
yeah,
descendants from that group of people. But the rest of the
West
Afro-Caribbean
Indians.
people, yeah, I mean they're descendants of those who were slaves, and there were revolts, sure, but still, because there's a majority on those islands, I feel like coming to like the difference between that and how you feel growing up when you're here creates a difference in how we see ourselves and how we like interact with each other. So if there's an advantage, I would say that the advantage is just a better sense of self, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've had people who are Black say the same thing when they go to different African countries, and they don't feel like
The
they're,
minority.
yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
even feel a difference in that. So anyway, go ahead, Winston. What do you think? Is there an advantage?
Well,
What is the advantage?
well, yeah, I would definitely say that the mindset is the biggest thing as well. That I would say, just because in terms of the question really begs where are you in the world? Because then it would really be a question of is it really an advantage at all, right? Because if you're
Right.
someplace in the world where either cultures aren't necessarily liked, then it really may not make a difference. But to your point, I think if we look at it from our lens and our perspective, it's a question of we as Black people, people identify or identified as African American. Um, I know for me growing up here, I came with a lot of the things you said, a lot of a mindset that Americans or African Americans were lazy, didn't work hard, were very privileged, had things handed to them, and just didn't know essentially kind of what to do with it. Um, and then having now lived here, I know even when I go back home, there is a huge culture shock. Even for me going back, because it seems like things seem so much slower and they're like so much more behind, in a sense. So I could just say I can't speak to what it's like to have grown up in Africa. The to your point, like what the movies and what like you said, Black Panther showed us. There's obviously the depiction of poverty there, where it's not really that case. If you've ever looked at like pictures, and then you shared with me a lot of things like Cape Cod, not Cape Cod. I'm sorry.
Cape Town.
Cape Town. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cape Town. How beautiful! I remember when you were looking at real estate in certain places there. I was shocked to see some of the just the landscape and the properties. I mean, things that are equivalent of things you find in LA, and
Mhm.
just not what I thought was there. And in my mind, for people to have things like that, luxuries like that, there's a certain income that you're having to make. So there's a lot of wealth there as well.
Mhm.
So I'd say growing up in a place where you see a lot of people who look like you having access to those wealth certainly is going to give you much more of an advantage mindset wise. And then obviously having the ability to do that. And then the other part of this for me, because is about where you are in the world and when you are. If you see a lot of the shifts that are going on right now financially in the world, America, I don't think is going to be as big a player in the next 20, 50 years. And
Mhm.
some of these other places that I think may have been overshadowed are going to now start being the places people want to be.
Mhm.
And so America, I don't think is necessarily going to continue being the draw that it is. And so I definitely think, because if you go to places in Africa, they speak multiple languages. It's just there's a different way that they look at education. Just different, yeah, just a very different look on life. They integrate with nature more. Like some of their cities are literally inside open forests. It's a very interesting way of looking at life. So I'm gonna say, yeah, there's definitely an advantage growing up African, or I would believe there would be, or with that the mindset. Yeah, So you want to jump into the
Okay,
video
yeah. So let's jump into this. We're gonna listen to
by the
the
guys from
fellas
Earn Your
from
Leisure?
Earn Your Leisure one more time. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely, kick it off.
You're born in America. What year were you born?
88.
You're born in 88. And 95, you go to Africa, Ghana for 7 years.
Yep.
So that's like what, like third grade, something like that?
Yeah, second grade.
Second grade
Up until like I came back when I was in 8th grade.
So you go from second grade to 8th grade, which effectively is like where you're actually growing up.
Correct.
So you're growing up in Ghana. Come back for high school in New York.
Yep. Went to Walton High School for teaching professions in Walton.
Was a high school inside of the high school.
Inside of the high school. So, we wore uniform. It was crazy. But, even like transitioning between coming back from Ghana to go to school, it was a culture shock because I hear students talking back to teachers.
Well, that's what I was getting at. So it's like, all right, you like French Montana, he moved to the Bronx.
Yeah.
From Morocco, Africa, but he just was in there for 12 years and then moved. So it's not as you were in America in the Bronx, went to Ghana and came back to the Bronx.
Yep.
How was that for you as far as a culture shock is concerned? And we have another friend from Nigeria, and he was saying like in Nigeria, like that's real popular. Like parents make sure that their kids go back to their country for a couple of years. Just they don't want them to lose the culture.
Yeah.
And they don't even live with them. Like they'll send them with an aunt or an uncle.
I lived with my grandmother and my uncle. So I lived with my uncle the first couple of years and then with my grandmother, which was an experience. My uncle hustled in Japan, as in he left Ghana to go to Japan to learn how to like make money. So he moved back to Ghana to start his own businesses. And but it was very different in the dynamic because I'm not with my parents. I don't really know him as an uncle like that. I just met him when I moved into his house. We're living in a house that is in Medina Zongo. It's very different than the people we go to school with, who are all living in like luxury. So my dad kind of, in his mind, he did that purposefully because he wanted us to be able to have that balance. At the time, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like it. It was just kind of like I didn't understand why they would leave us here. Every once in a while, like they'll make us feel happy by like shipping us a bunch of boxes of cereal or like powdered milk.
It's real, man.
It just kind of made you take appreciation for like being able to go to the corner store and get like a gallon of milk or get a bag of chips or quarter soda after the quarter water or something like that. Back then. So whenever we would get to come back for the summertime were the best times, right? Because then you get to go back to Ghana and go to school and show them all the new kicks, show them all the new gear, tell them like all the new music that's coming out. Yeah, you're the man. When you have that, I guess, proximity to abroad in Ghana during those times, you were the man. Like, you know what I mean? It was very, very popular. I think the internet has kind of changed that because now they can see everything as we see it. But back then, you were the man because you kind of brought them culture that they didn't really have access to. So yeah, it was interesting. So I think we came right around 9/11. We moved back to the US and my pops was like, do you guys want to stay? We're like, yes, Dad, we want to stay. Please. Like, and we stayed and it was a culture shock because going to school, like I knew about the clothes. Like, my brother would let me hold his Jordans. I'll never forget. That's the reason why till to this day, I'm still trying to find the cool gray 11s because my brother would let me rock the cool gray.
I should have put those up.
Yeah, I know, but it's cool. The 3s are my favorite.
All right, we got those too.
So, I would rock his, and the thing that connected all of us was hip hop. Like, at the time, I think Jadakiss and Beanie Siegel was
going at it.
And my brother was like always putting us on to like the music, letting us know what's going on. Yeah. So, that was the one thing I could connect with them on because, we were taught to be demure, like to teachers. Like you couldn't talk back to a teacher. You couldn't look at him in the eye because you were afraid that you would get beat. When I was in Ghana, they would beat you in school. So back here, people was just cursing at teachers.
Yeah. I was on the other end of that.
I used to look at like, yo, you talking to the teacher like you know what I mean? So it was an interesting, culture shock at the time because I wasn't used to that for a very long time. I couldn't understand how people were talking to teachers like that at the time.
How quickly did you adapt to that?
I never talked back to it. I think one time in high school, but that was out of anger, man. Somebody trying to play me. In high school they was throwing paper and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those are things. That's like the only fight I've ever had in high school. That, but outside of that, like it was dangerous then because there was a lot of gangs and
did you have issues like embracing your African, because like you said, now it's a vibe as far as Afro beats has really it's made it cool, but back then kids is ignorant and cruel, and just people were just ignorant in general. So I've personally seen like African kids getting teased, like what I'm saying, and it's looking back on it, that's something that's very it's unfortunate, but I've seen it happen, and in any group of people, right? That's just happens. Like, so I guess sometimes you either like drill down on just like becoming, you just have a pack of people, or sometimes you just try to assimilate and you try to get away from.
Nah, I couldn't do that. My parents had a restaurant. It was really well known that this is a restaurant. When I came back from Ghana, I had an accent. It was thick, like, you know what I mean? But it was just jokes, right? So if somebody joked on me, I joked on them. Like, I'm African, but I'm flyer than you. Like, those kind of things worked back then. Like, you know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying? It would just be like quick jokes. And then eventually, kids are shallow in that they didn't really joke on you if you was fly, like, or if you had like a little bit of money or something like that. Like it was like the one thing that let them know. And then also like I have a very big family in the Bronx. Like, you know what I mean? I have 7 brothers, 8 brothers, mad cousins. Like, you know what I mean? So it wasn't something that people.
You wasn't an outcast.
I wasn't an outcast. I wasn't something that like. I don't remember ever getting picked on, like, because, my big brother would come on. And maybe once in 8th grade, I got picked on. My brother came up to the school.
Some things you don't forget.
Yeah, so you don't forget that. Like, you know what I'm saying? But like, I always had people in my community that was like always gonna hold it down. And I knew the blocks, like right on Burnside Avenue. That's our neighborhood. Like, people knew like my whole family. Nobody really messed with my pops.
Dominicans up there.
All of them know like who my pops is and who my block, like my brothers are, and my family is. They don't really. Cedric Avenue, right there.
Birth of hip hop.
Right by Walton. We grew up there, so my cousins were there, and they were in the neighborhood for a long time. Nobody really messed with us, like, so it was really just about being able to get from high school to home, right? So being able to bypass that 4 train.
People really don't understand that part of being like, and it's something I had to learn, right? So we went to school out here, but like when I started teaching there and I started coaching, I'm so used to being transported to and from like a game by a school bus.
Yeah.
Until I realized I got to take the 5 train.
Yep.
And I got to take 2 train, and I got to take the bus, and it's like you're susceptible to everything, but then you forget like the kid who's getting on the bus at 10 years old or the trainer, he's susceptible to everything too. So like that. Being in New York City, like those things, you don't even think. You just kind of like, all right, it's part of life.
I didn't realize it was trauma until I got to Syracuse.
Okay.
Because
University?
Syracuse. Like, you would go through the metal detectors to go to school.
Yep.
There was a time where I didn't even go to the 2nd floor because DDP was there. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was just like if you were black, you was, anything could happen. Or the 9 bus or the 22 bus, people coming from Kennedy. Right, from Kennedy, then you meeting with people going from Walton on the 4 train, coming with people from Evander. It was just like so many different ways that it was dangerous that, it was an interesting time. But, thankfully, like, for me, I was always a pretty good student, but also like because I had my family, I didn't really have that many problems. I knew people in Roosevelt, I knew people in all of these schools that like will always hold it down for me and the family. So we never had much worries, you know what I mean? And my dad told us how to defend ourselves as well on the block as well. Yeah. So we was always good. But it was definitely a culture shock because it was something I didn't have to worry about in Ghana. Like, in Ghana, all I had to worry about was going to school, the driver will come pick us up, take us home, the food will be made for us. Maybe they iron our clothes for us, they'll wash our clothes for us on the weekend. I didn't have to worry about any of that. When I came back to America, it was just kind of like a reality about, knowing how to protect yourself in that time. I think New York is completely different than it was when I was growing up in high school. From my perspective now, maybe I'm just kind of.
In what way?
I just don't think it's as dangerous. You know, I remember
The Bronx,
like it was.
the Bronx
I just remember like
it's more dangerous now.
It ain't changing.
No, but I just remember like it was a thing to not wear red.
Oh yeah, the gang thing.
Yeah.
The gang thing, that was early stages of the gang thing.
Yeah.
So that was like heavy. They were still like tripping off of colors.
Yeah,
it's not like that now, but it's still heavy.
You know, I remember like being afraid to get $150. Like, you know, that was
That's
like
the thing.
that was a real fear,
Yeah.
right? So and I feel like I don't necessarily know that is a thing that I'm like afraid to do. Like I don't know a block in New York City that I'm afraid to walk on. Back then, it was like, yo, I don't know about going there. Like,
but you was also a kid though too.
I was also a kid.
That's what I'm saying. Your environment, that's all you know, right? It's like absolutely. That 8-block radius. It's like, all right, we don't leave here. And if we do, we better be on guard if we leave here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. I think that all of that just kind of made me who I am, and all of that has seeped through in the way I've developed the business and how I'm thoughtful about how we invite people, how we extend our relationships to different people that we collaborate with and have them come back to Ghana, because it's really just to kind of show them that like there's a completely new world where you can just kind of like walk freely. To me, one of my joys is like walking in Ghana and seeing my friends that are not from Ghana just walk in the streets, just be. And I love that for them.
Good.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about that guy. We'll do some research, guys, and see if we could connect with who he is.
Yeah, I think what he described, like in schools, you didn't talk back, but also you got picked up by a driver who took you to school. You know, it was just probably more structured. It probably just felt more structured. To your point, Winston, you brought that up. Like there's the way education was. I don't know. There's a more seriousness about education, right? Like back in these countries. And so when you come back to the States, or what he described, you know, you come back to the States, people are like back talking teachers and things like that. But also like you're kind of like on your own, right? You gotta like take care of your own food. You gotta navigate how you're gonna get to school. And apparently in the Bronx, at least I can't say all of America, but I have a feeling it is like, I mean, this New York City is not like any other city in the world. So yeah. I'll put that out there. But even if you're from like, where's Nelly from?
St. Louis.
So even if you're from St. Louis, though, I know that it's true that if you go to a public school, you still have to like find your way home. Like I think a lot of those kids still walk home. Maybe they don't have the public transportation.
Yeah, what this guy is talking about what he's talking about, I 100% know. I mean, I went to school in Brooklyn, but this thing he's talking about knowing which way to go and knowing there's certain paths you actually shouldn't go. I definitely went to high school during the era where Crips and Bloods were coming up, and for the area I lived in, Brooklyn, it was really big on Crips, so you didn't wear red, but
it's possible we may have lost Vincent. He might be having some technical issues. Well, it's true that here we go. I think he's back. Yeah,
my bad.
But you were talking about how it's
Crips and Bloods. You couldn't wear certain colors. Mm-hmm. You definitely could not wear certain colors. And I'm telling you that there were kids that were friends who, because of where they actually lived outside of our school, couldn't hang out outside of school anymore because the friends that knew them from their neighborhoods were not going to have it. It was at that point. So I'm not a kid anymore. I think they brought up a good point about us being adults now. So it's obviously maybe not as scary to us now as men. Because I know there's still violence. I still see kids doing handshakes and secret whatever that are parts of little gangs here and there. But I don't think it's as crazy as it used to be when we were getting kids. $1.50, for anyone who doesn't know, it was literally they used to come up and ask you what time is it. And when you look down to see the time, they would slash you across your face. And that was a part of a gang initiation. So if anyone used to come up to you and say, hey, what time is it? You were actually taught to turn and run as fast. If a group of kids came up to you and it was like, yo, my man, what time is it? It meant that they were about to hold you down and slice your face. So I know exactly what he's talking about. And they
called that $1.50.
That's $1.50. Yeah. And it was a big part of the gang initiation. So I know both Crips and Bloods had to do that or jump you. And I remember summers where you saw, again, a group of kids with red flags or blue flags. If you weren't with a group of kids, you're probably just best just to get out of there. I can only imagine the Bronx, because the Bronx I used to hear was wilder than Brooklyn. So I can only imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I lived in the Bronx right out of undergrad, and I remember that whole slashing thing because I didn't know that it was called a $150 though. I was just told, like, if anybody, especially at night, if anybody approaches you and they seem to like you're alone, but they're not, it was like they could be trying to, do the initiation and try to slash your face. Halloween was a big night. They were like, don't be on the subways on Halloween. Just
don't be out, but I think because they were doing that. And then the best thing about, but the thing about Halloween is, again, they're dressed up now, so they're not even able to figure out who these people were that did this thing.
Right.
It's a bunch of, costumes running around. So that conversation definitely didn't go where I thought it was, because he brought up a lot of things that, again, as somebody who wasn't born here, I remember experiencing that as well. I remember going home to my family in the summer, and because I had what they call, foreigner, I was a foreigner now, I had nicer clothes than they got access to. They thought my family was wealthy. In respect, oh, your sneakers are, wow, that's amazing. Because in Jamaica, how much more it would cost for them to get access to things like that, or the nicest things. And so I definitely know what he's talking about there. It was very interesting to see. And I remember that period where Africans weren't talked about positively in school. There were a lot of negative.
Yeah, and it seems like his family was big enough that he
got shielded from some of
that. Yeah. What I thought was interesting, and they didn't get into it in this particular segment, is he started to say that he didn't realize how much trauma he had been through until he went to university, and then he realized, like, oh dang, like I've been through some stuff.
Happened to me as well. Yeah, happened to me as well. You get out of that city and people start being hi, hello, and you're like, what's wrong with you? Like, we're nice people. We say hi to each other. But think about that. You don't necessarily get on the subway in New York, and if someone starts talking to you, and again, maybe that's where a little bit difference. I can tell you just from network marketing, we got the skills to kind of start doing things like that. But I wouldn't tell you that I think that's a normal thing to see people to do, and greeting each other, being kind, if they don't have
full
an
disclosure,
incentive.
I am there's a lot of empty tables right now, but before there were like a ton of people here. I am in Grand Central Station. Here, I'll even do like a thing so people can see.
You're muted,
Sorry, Grand Central Station has been in a ton of movies. You guys have probably seen that famous clock right there in the middle.
Yeah. There's a movie called 222. Go check it out. It's all about this place.
But I only bring that up because, like, you see, like, the amount of people, and like that's just the culture here in New York. You just don't.
Yeah, hustle and bustle. You're getting to go.
Yeah,
you gotta go.
You got a place to go. You got to get there.
So you talked about it. I walked to school. I didn't get public. I wasn't being driven in a bus. I walked to school when school was close enough, and then when it wasn't, I definitely got taught how to take a train and bus because my parents had to go to work, so I didn't have somebody who dropped me to school. So I definitely know that we're taught. Yeah, well, and we talked about this on the overparenting episode.
Right.
A lot of what we experienced.
How old were you when you went outside?
Yeah.
Well, to your point, this video didn't necessarily answer the question of is there an advantage, but it definitely brought up some things that, again, would make it seem like it is an advantage to grow up in Africa, because it just didn't seem as dangerous for what it's worth, right? Like,
I think there is, to some degree, because I think some of the things he talked about, he got to experience certain things about being there and being viewed a certain way that he wasn't getting here in America. Now, granted, he didn't say he got bullied and things, but he also wasn't here and his sneakers were whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Over there, it was, yo, how are you getting these things? He's being pampered over there. To me, I wonder how much, and again, we will want to get to know this guy a little bit better. I wonder how that played into him wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to whatever the businesses that he's
doing. He talked about his uncle going to Japan
and doing that kind of stuff. I'm wondering how seeing those different things, because he said, I didn't know this uncle. I didn't even know this guy, but it's like a rich dad, poor dad probably kind of situation. But all of a sudden now he's being taught, oh, wow, I can do commerce. Because he said his business is over there. And he's doing an interview here with Earn Your Leisure. So he's obviously traveling back and forth for his business. How many
I
of
think
us
that gives you
would even want to have that?
and I can't imagine that it wouldn't give you a worldly view.
That's my
Just
point. That's exactly my point.
yeah,
Because even when you and I talk, it's not like we think about taking SayThat to Jamaica or to you know what
yeah,
I mean, like
we're
the
thinking
Dominican
all
Republic.
over,
We don't even think that, but
right?
he's seeing it in a global. He's gotten that a
Yeah,
global experience. So I would say I think it is good to be a world citizen, because one of the
yeah,
things I find about America personally, just some people I've encountered, it is a very limited mindset because they think this place has all of the value that there is to offer in the world. And I think just people who've traveled, you'd be sadly mistaken about how beautiful the rest of the world is.
yeah.
And we're not, you're limited to it because America, I don't think necessarily paints the right image of the rest of the world always.
Now let's be clear. America does not paint the rest of the world in an accurate light, but there are certain things that you do get here in America that you don't get in other places.
Yeah. No,
So
I'm not
I
against
just
any of
also
it.
want to, yeah, I was gonna say, I just also want to acknowledge that part too. So like, kids here probably have access to computers, just their phones, are little computers, right? So like, they have access to computers, phones, constant Wi-Fi and internet. Like I know in many countries in Africa, that's not the case. You still have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to get access to consistent Wi-Fi.
See, but
Um,
there are places here where, again, we think that doesn't happen here, I would say. And I know that there are places where I've seen people put up internet things where they're being charged exorbitant amount of rates for their heat, their electricity. I mean, even on Earn Your Leisure, they talked about this. As New Yorkers, you showing off Grand Central, we live in like a little microcosm of not what America as a
fair
majority
enough.
go through. Because I know that there are people who
Fair enough.
they don't have that experience. I mean, think about the wildfire thing that we've talked about even just this week. Their current experience, New York doesn't get that stuff. Like we don't get earthquakes. Like we don't have. I just think that there's certain luxuries that we probably get here that other people in other states in America are like, what? Like, you got heat how often? No, seriously, like, wait, your water never gets polluted to the point where you can't drink
Polluted,
it?
yeah,
Your water
yeah.
never gets polluted to the point where you can't drink it? Wait, you never have a hurricane rip off the middle of the arena in the middle of your town like every other 2 years? Seriously.
Right,
You don't have a
right.
tornado rip through your village or whatever every other year? Like the infra to rebuild some of what I see in little glimpses on the news that happens in other places, to me, it's staggering. Because I don't know how that city, it's like a real life Marvel movie. They're like half their city's blown up. And in my mind, it's like, if you think about what that would cost for these people to rebuild, it's insane.
Well, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, I know. I don't go too far down the rabbit hole. Sorry about that, guys. But guys, let us know what your thoughts was on this, and
Yes,
the other cultures that you've experienced that you are a part of, and maybe
we'd
how
love
it
to.
differs against. Again, we assume growing up here in America. I think a lot of part of what he was talking about was that growing up here part, which was really cool
Yeah,
to hear him discuss,
yeah.
and to get into. But we leave it there for today. So
As always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
say that. We'll see you guys.